it's a really messy situation. It all started with an investigation into Tennessee, into the Nico situation, and then potentially more sports than just that. But of course, it was very public um, that Tennessee paid Nico Iamaleava a huge sum of money. Well, or I guess Tennessee's collective was involved in getting a contract that was for a huge sum of money for Nico Iamaleava. I'll put it that way. That's the real legalese of it there. And the NCAA, because of that, they can't let anything just be. They come snooping around that situation, pay no mind to the fact that every major program in America is doing these things now. Georgia's quarterback bought a Lamborghini yesterday, but Tennessee is the only one that really needs investigating. Who am I to say? But it started there. And Tennessee was notified of this months ago, and they were very prepared. They had coordinated not just within their own organization, but with the state government. And they had formulated a way to slap back at the NCAA. And they put together super strong public statements from the chancellor and the athletic director and the president of the university and all of these different people. And then you had state representatives speaking out. And you had the governor of the state of Tennessee speaking out. And then Tennessee throws down this lawsuit. The state of Tennessee, the attorney general of the state of Tennessee, slaps down this lawsuit, suing the NCAA, essentially wanting to deem its laws illegal because they violate the Sherman Antitrust Act. That's the accusation in the lawsuit. And so that's where we sit now. Yes, there was Tennessee wanted a temporary restraining order. But with a temporary restraining order, now I'll say this: I am no lawyer. A lot of this comes from speaking to a guy at A to Z who is A to Z Sports, who I do my show for. We have a guy who is a lawyer, and I've just kind of been bouncing off like, hey, what's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on that? And so that's where a lot of my thoughts on this come from. But from what I understand, a temporary restraining order, you have to show irreparable and essentially immediate damage, and that really doesn't exist here. And so it wasn't necessarily surprising that they did not get granted that temporary restraining order. Now there's a hearing on the 13th for an injunction that's going to be heard on similar grounds. But of course, before the 13th, Tennessee has the chance to formulate even more thoughts to prove irreparable damage and to prove that what the NCAA is doing is illegal and is causing tons of harm to athletes. And the read on it currently is sort of that injunction is up in the air. It could be granted, could not be, but the long term, as far as this case goes, and the judge in the case himself said this in his decision on the temporary restraining order, is that it is likely that Tennessee will win this case on the merits of the NCAA's rules violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. And so, I mean, the judge in the case said that in the legal document that was released yesterday, along with the denial for the temporary restraining order. That's bad news for the NCAA. I mean, that's really bad. Now, Tennessee might lose these two battles at the beginning. Maybe they'll win the injunction, and we're already moving in the right direction as far as Tennessee is concerned. But I think in the long term, the NCAA is going to be facing down now this ruling that their rules and their enforcement is essentially illegal. What happens from all of that, I have zero clue, because now you have the SEC getting involved, getting an advisory panel, and a lot of people are speculating that that's essentially they're planning to create sort of a super league of sorts and push out the NCAA, which would make a lot of sense. That also comes along with potentially allowing players to be employees, and in that case unionize and be able to collectively bargain. And there's so many ramifications that come along with this. And I would say, anybody's best guess is as good as mine as far as how any of this turns out. I think the NCAA will lose that case, whether it's next week or eventually. And what all of that means, I do not know. Now, as far as Tennessee, I know the NCAA is going to want Tennessee to sit Nico Iamaleava and all of these things. If Tennessee's smart, I don't think they should do that. And I think Tennessee is led by smart people. I don't think that they should bow one single inch to any of this because they're eventually going to win this war. The college football in America is going to win this war eventually. Because realistically, this isn't Tennessee versus the NCAA. This is college sports versus the NCAA. At the end of the day, and so I wouldn't give them a single inch or bow down to anything they say, or even allow them in your building again. Frankly, but I don't know what exactly will happen there. What exactly the administration at Tennessee is thinking. But that's where we're at right now. So hopefully that all makes sense. It's a lot, and it's a lot of legal nonsense, but there you go.
No, thank your guy at A to Z Sports that through you, we can better understand where we stand on all this. Now, I will say it this way that, yeah, Tennessee is at the epicenter of this collision between the NCAA and what the future could look like. And if Tennessee loses, then the NCAA will carry on forward. And that just does not in any way, shape, or form appear to be the way college sports and football in particular is headed in any such way that the NCAA would be able to maintain its authority and that it would be able to govern going forward. So I think that Tennessee is actually, in this case, going to be at the epicenter of what we may look back upon 10 or 15, 20 years from now and say that was the straw that broke the NCAA's back and caved it all in. The thing that I at least try to clarify in my own mind is that what the NCAA is trying to hold together is almost in a sense, and we had this conversation the other night on a live stream, was being phrased as an illegal cartel of basically an ever growing business that is just continued because of the age of television more than anything has grown into this just $1 billion business. And we're going to continue to use them as just scholarship athletes and as amateurs. But the NIL, I know it's become blurred and it's become a replacement for paying them. But NIL in and of itself is supposed to be a way for any American, regardless of what you've got, for a 13-year-old on a TikTok channel to be able to make money based on their celebrity. Whether we deem it as being valuable or not valuable, if they can market their celebrity and make money through NIL, that's what that is supposed to be. And now that's only seemed to open the floodgates to an ever increasing demand or clarity in that they're actually performing work and labor for a multi-billion-dollar business. Therefore, they should be paid.
I think you framed it perfectly there. A legal cartel that's a descriptor that I've used for the NCAA for years at this point. I mean, they are doing something in the way that they operate that if you applied it to any other profession on earth in just in our free market society here, it makes no sense. It makes zero sense. There is someone performing a job that makes tons of money, produces so much revenue, and they are not allowed by the trade organization that oversees their whole deal. They are not allowed to see a cent of that. In what other job does that happen?
Well, I think they've been able to get away for it for a long time by using the scholarship and the value of the scholarship as pay. Or compensation, I should say.
Yeah, I mean that has always been a convenient excuse. I've always kind of thrown that one away because I mean at the end of the day, it's the university bearing that cost, but it's still like the value of a scholarship can't be just set at one thing, because really the value of a degree and the value of a college education comes from what you do with it. It doesn't come from the fact that you have it. Like, you can't just, I got a college scholarship, and then if you never go to class, you never do anything, that college scholarship is worth literally nothing. I mean, it means nothing to you. And so I have always pushed back on that because, obviously with a lot of these athletes, they go and they get a communications degree and it's worth less than the piece of paper it's printed on. And so, and they, they don't go to class and they don't, there's everything that comes along with that. That's very, I'm speaking of big generalizations there. That's not true across the board, but it happens a lot, way more than probably people think. And so I've never put much stock in that at all, and it's always been that convenient excuse for the NCAA to go like, no, you don't get a cut of this multi-billion-dollar pie. No. You got that scholarship. I'll give you a little pat on the head. Congratulations. Now go out into the real world and flourish, and I'll keep my billions. And that's always been such an injustice to me, and I can't stand it. I've been beating this drum for years and years at this point. And to the point where I used to, the public sentiment has finally turned against the NCAA in a big way. But I remember 2015ish when I first started really being out on radio and things like that and beating this drum, and there's just a lot of people that still toed that oh, they should just play for a scholarship and the name on their jersey. But that's just with the TV deals and all the money that runs through these sports. That's not realistic. That's not real. And you're just, honestly, completely taking advantage of all these athletes that produce all this revenue. But that's sorry to go on a diatribe there. I've been
all right. That's why we got you here,
yeah.
Joe.
I've loaded up for this moment for years. I'm all about
it. The only thing I would say against that, though, is that, yes, the value of the scholarship is only as good as what you put it to use to do. However, for anybody who's paid for a college education, you know that regardless of what you do with it, you still had to pay for it. So it still had to be, there was still a value placed on it to say this is worth $30,000 a year, $50,000 a year, whatever the price at that university. So it still had to be paid for, and they're still receiving that compensation. So let's say they're at this point, they are $50,000 a year on average players based on the compensation of that scholarship, at 105 of them per football team. That's a pretty large payroll. So there is some compensation there. So I'm somewhere where you stand on this, and maybe the traditional purist to the nth degree on this, because I do think that they've received value.
It's not worth absolutely zero. There's no doubt about that. And of course, if you take advantage of it, it can be worth a ton. There have been a lot of guys that, and guys and girls that go and play college sports and use it to become a doctor or a lawyer, an engineer or something. And they make it, then it's worth a lot. And yeah, you are correct. A college education now at this point does cost an absolute mint. It's a racket in itself, but that's a different conversation. And it's a fair point, but it doesn't make up for it, because frankly, that element of it is just wholly unrelated to the fact that they go out and they play on television and they have these huge personalities, and they get to bank in on absolutely none of it. It just doesn't match up. And now, you add in the fact that the NCAA was such a Luddite. They stayed denying the fact that this was ever going to happen on amateurism. They tried to keep that in place for so long. And then suddenly they kept holding on to that rubber band, and now it's finally NIL took it out of their hand and it snapped back in the other direction. So hard that now I think this moment with Tennessee was unavoidable. If it wasn't Tennessee, it was going to happen with somebody else that finally says, that stands up to the bully and goes, enough's enough. We're not doing this anymore. This whole sham is over. There was a part in Donnie Plowman's statement where she lays out a few things that have happened and just the reality of NIL. And at the very end, she says, all of this is happening and everybody knows it. Stop. And I thought it was so great, because she finally said the part that the NCAA has wanted to keep quiet out loud, because everybody who is wanting to compete at a high level in college sports is doing this stuff. And the toothpaste is so far out of the tube, there is no turning back. And the NCAA serves no practical purpose at this point. Outside of they're a half decent event organizer. I'll give them that. They should be an event organizing company. And then, hey, fine. You keep, I'm okay with that much. But that's it. That's all you get to do in my mind going forward if the NCAA is to exist at all. And frankly, I think the conclusion of this lawsuit is probably that the NCAA will become a glorified event organizer. At least I hope that's what the outcome is.
So unfortunately, we got to wrap this up, Charlie, but I appreciate you being here. My final statement on this was I was hoping that NIL, and if it was sanctioned correctly and set up correctly, that could be the way to compensate the athletes and also keep the sanctity, some level of purity, some level of tradition in the scholarship model and uh, the signing of players to schools to play at those schools. And then the NIL, again, would be a way for them to earn money the way any American can earn money, which that's ridiculous that up until 2 years ago that athletes could not earn money like any other American could earn money in any fashion on social media or otherwise. And I thought that would compensate them and then be able to fill that void of uh, labor exchange for compensation. So, but that's not turned out to be the case. And now, unfortunately, what could end up happening, even though it's right, even though it's fair, even though it's what the players have earned, college football could become a minor league NFL. And I don't think that's going to be very attractive to people that just will say, well, why don't I just watch the NFL then? Because it's a better brand of this same thing.
Yeah, that it's gonna be a pretty delicate process to thread this needle long term. Like I said, I think I know what the end of this lawsuit is probably going to be, but I don't know what comes after that. I genuinely, it is really going to be kind of like when NIL was instituted. I said at the beginning of that, like, this is going to be painful for a minute, where you have to get this market like ironed out because it is going to be Wild West. I think everybody sort of knew that up front, and that has turned out to be the case. And I think it'll be the same when the NCAA finally, when its bill finally comes due. What exactly comes out of that is I don't know, because I do agree it does seem like the natural conclusion is to have college football be an NFL feeder league essentially, where they have whatever the NCAA version of the NFLPA is, and you have salaries and you have kind of a transparent market of contract prices and things like that. Because without those parameters, I don't know how it works any other way. Genuinely, I've racked my brain to try to find anything because I do agree. There's just so much amazing tradition and all of these great things that you're throwing into chaos with all of these changes. But I don't know. I don't know what the other alternatives are. Because to be truly fair to these players, I'm just not sure there is any other way. We'll see. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be an interesting time.
And unfortunately, the type person or player that I can see being the victim of this years down the road would be the player who has no shot at going to the NFL, but believes that they do, or just sees the $50,000, $80,000 check, whatever it is, for those 3 or 4 years in college, but does not prepare himself for the rest of life through the mode in which he would have a decade ago and taken it more seriously, being in school and taking advantage of that opportunity, and then being out on the streets, having squandered his $75,000 check for 4 years and not really building toward a future.
No doubt. And where does it leave what is now called Group of Five, I guess.
Yeah.
In the future.
What are they going to get paid? $8,000 a year, which is
exactly.
There's nothing wrong. That's more than they get now, but still, that's not going to prepare them for anything. So they better take school seriously.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately a good thing in my opinion, and there's a lot to that I won't go into because I know you got to wrap it up. I think ultimately it's a good thing, but getting there it's going to be painful. Again, I don't know what form exactly that takes. Like, I don't think anybody could have exactly guessed how NIL has gone so far, but it's in my personal take on it. It's just what has to happen.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and I agree in terms of it's a good thing for the individual, and I think it's
Yep.
fair. I think it's fair, or we're headed in that direction for it being fair. I don't know that it's going to be good for the sport though. Uh,
Yeah.
Charlie Burris, Big Orange Pod, you see right there, A to Z Sports. You see both his Twitter handle or X handle, and then also the podcast handle as well. Please join Charlie there. Charlie, we always appreciate talking to you. Great topic. I'm sure we can dig at this one at a future date as well as this unfolds over and over and over.
Absolutely. I got plenty more to say about it, Mark. Make no mistake about that. But as always, I really enjoyed it. Thanks.